The music had already started. The pastor was waiting. My bride stood smiling at the altar. Her family urged me forward. "It's time," they said, all shining teeth and perfection. But even then, as I looked around the room filled with warmth and light, one seat was still empty, my mother's. My name is Patrick Carter, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I'd spent months planning every detail: the white lilies, the wooden chairs polished to a soft glow, the gold-ribboned candles flickering against the walls of the old mountain lodge. Outside, the snow fell quietly, like powdered glass. Everything looked like a scene from one of those winter postcards my mother used to keep on the fridge. I remember thinking, maybe this is what peace looks like. But peace is strange. Sometimes it's just silence hiding something you're not ready to hear. I stood by the window, watching flakes settle on the pine trees. The smell of roasted chestnuts and cedar filled the air. Behind me, laughter. My bride's sisters arranging flowers, her father checking his watch. I smiled, trying to believe I belonged in that picture. And yet, beneath all that joy, something in me felt off, like a soft echo that wouldn't go away. Maybe it was because I'd never seen myself as the man who'd marry into a family like hers. They were polished, confident, the kind of people who always spoke as if every sentence deserved applause. My mother, Margaret Carter, was nothing like that. She was quiet warmth. She didn't need to fill a room to be felt. I turned the small gold watch on my wrist, my father's watch. She'd given it to me that morning, standing by the window of our cabin, the snow dusting her gray hair. "Your father would have wanted you to wear it," she'd said. Then she smiled that patient smile I'd known all my life. "No matter how far you go, never forget who held your hand first." She'd said the same thing years ago when she helped me tie my first tie for the school dance. I can still see her reflection behind me in the mirror, fixing my collar, brushing the dust off my jacket, whispering, "You'll do fine, honey. Just be kind." That morning, I caught myself repeating those words. Just be kind. The room around me blurred with motion, photographers shouting for poses, my best man clapping my shoulder, Emily's mother sweeping in like a director making sure the final act went perfectly. I nodded, smiled, thanked everyone. The perfect groom. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was missing. I searched for my mother among the guests arriving, but her gentle silhouette wasn't there. She was supposed to sit in the second row, by the aisle. I told myself she was probably helping someone, maybe fixing her hair, maybe checking the cake. My mother was always the one helping, always the one making sure others felt comfortable. I faced the mirror one last time before the ceremony. The reflection stared back, black suit, steady tie, the weight of expectation sitting on my shoulders. I touched the old watch again, feeling the pulse beneath it. "I just hope she's proud of me," I whispered. And then, before the silence could settle, the door burst open. "Patrick," someone said breathlessly, "there's a small issue with the dinner. They're asking for your mom." I turned, half smiling, half confused. Dinner? At this hour? The snow outside thickened against the window, and something deep inside me, quiet, almost imperceptible, shifted. Because for the first time that day, I realized peace can look perfect right before it breaks.
Margaret Carter had always been the kind of woman who couldn't watch someone struggle without stepping in to help. It was her nature. Quiet, steady, always finding a way to make herself useful, even when no one asked her to. That morning she had woken early, humming to herself while pressing Patrick's shirt, careful with every fold. She wanted everything perfect for him. By the time the guests began arriving, the lodge glowed like a golden lantern against the snow. From where she stood in the kitchen corridor, she could hear laughter and soft piano music drifting from the main hall. She smiled to herself. "He deserves this kind of joy," she thought. "Mrs. Carter?" Margaret turned. It was Lydia, Emily's sister. Tall, polished, and always speaking as if her time were being wasted. She had a phone in one hand and an air of practiced urgency. "Oh, thank goodness I found you," Lydia said, lowering her voice. "There's been a small disaster." Margaret's heart jumped. "Disaster?" "The caterer," Lydia sighed. "They forgot the potatoes. Can you imagine? We can't serve dinner without them. Mashed potatoes are the centerpiece of the menu." Margaret blinked. "Oh dear. Is there anything I can do?" "That's the thing," Lydia replied quickly, glancing around. "You're the only one we can trust. The staff's busy with the main course, and the nearest store's just 15, 20 minutes away. If you could go pick them up, we could fix everything before anyone notices." Margaret hesitated. She looked toward the main hall, where the murmur of conversation grew louder. "But Patrick, the ceremony is about to—" "It won't take long," Lydia interrupted, with a reassuring smile that never reached her eyes. "He'll be busy with photos for at least an hour. Honestly, you'd be saving the day." Margaret tried to protest again, but the words tangled in her throat. She didn't want to embarrass her son's new family. They already looked at her like she didn't belong. The way Lydia's eyes flickered over her simple dress told her as much. So instead she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "Where's the market?" Lydia's relief sounded rehearsed. "Just down the main road, Snowfield Market. You'll see it right away." "Thank you, Mrs. Carter, truly." Margaret smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to women who'd spent a lifetime putting others first. She fetched her old coat, worn at the sleeves but clean, and slipped it over her shoulders. The wind outside howled as she stepped onto the back porch. Snow crunched under her boots, the cold nipping at her cheeks. From where she stood, she could see the lodge glowing warmly behind her, light spilling through frosted windows, laughter echoing faintly through the walls. Inside, Patrick was probably smiling for the photographer, the proud groom surrounded by faces that sparkled under chandeliers. She paused for a moment, hand on the car door, and whispered to herself, "He's happy, Margaret. That's all that matters." She got in, started the car, and pulled onto the snowy road, headlights cutting through the gray-white haze. Back inside the lodge, Lydia brushed a few flakes of snow from her shoulders and stepped into the main hall. Her father, Mr. Foster, was speaking with the event coordinator near the altar. "She agreed," Lydia murmured, leaning close. Her father didn't look surprised. "Good," he said quietly. "Let's keep things on schedule." Lydia nodded, glancing toward the dining area where the guests were beginning to take their seats. She opened her phone, her manicured fingers tapping quickly across the screen. A single message appeared, sent to her mother. "She's gone. You can tell them to start earlier." She locked the screen, slid the phone into her clutch, and smiled, a polite, perfect smile that looked exactly like her sister's. Outside, the snow fell heavier, muffling the sound of the engine as Margaret Carter's car disappeared down the winding road, the warm light of the lodge fading slowly behind her.
The air inside the lodge shimmered with warmth and perfume. Voices overlapped. Laughter rolled like soft waves against the wooden walls, and the faint hum of the piano blended with the crackle of the fire. Everything looked picture perfect, just as Emily's family had planned it. I moved from one group of guests to another, shaking hands, smiling, thanking everyone for being there. "Congratulations, Patrick. You're a lucky man, son. She's a beautiful bride." I nodded, laughing along, though most of these faces meant little to me. I didn't see my mother among them, but I didn't worry at first. She had a way of disappearing when the crowd got too loud. The photographer motioned for me to stand by the window for another picture. I fixed my tie, smiled as told, and tried to ignore how stiff my face felt. "Perfect," he said. "One more." The flash went off. For a brief second, everything turned white, like the snow outside pressing its face against the glass. When the light faded, I found myself glancing toward the rows of chairs already lined for the ceremony. My mother's was right near the front, second from the aisle, tied with a small white ribbon she'd brought from home. She'd insisted on doing that herself, saying, "A touch of something personal." But the chair was empty. I looked again, squinting past the flickering candles. The other seats were filled, coats draped, purses set neatly on laps. Her chair alone sat untouched, the ribbon still perfectly tied, the cushion untouched. I turned to Anna, one of Emily's bridesmaids, who was arranging flowers near the altar. "Have you seen my mom?" I asked, keeping my tone casual.
Anna glanced up, distracted. "Oh, she went to help with something for the dinner, I think." "The dinner?" I frowned. "Yeah," she said, already turning back to the bouquet. "She's amazing, by the way, so sweet." I smiled faintly, letting it go. That was just like her, helping someone else on my wedding day. But as I walked toward the refreshment table, a strange heaviness settled over me. I passed by the main window, catching a glimpse of the falling snow outside. It was thicker now, the kind that makes the mountains fade into the sky. For a fleeting second, I imagined her out there, and brushed the thought away as nonsense. I sat for a moment near the aisle, resting my hands on my knees. The pianist shifted into a soft waltz. Across the room, Emily's father was speaking with the event coordinator, both glancing at their watches. A waiter hurried by carrying trays of glasses. Everything was moving, spinning, shining, except that one empty chair. My eyes returned to it over and over, until it almost felt like it was staring back at me. I reached up and adjusted the gold watch on my wrist. The second hand ticked in steady rhythm, too steady. The same rhythm I'd heard my father's heartbeat under my cheek when I was a boy, drifting to sleep after a thunderstorm. My mother used to hum through those nights, her voice soft and sure. "Don't worry, sweetheart, the storm always passes." It had been almost an hour since the last time I'd seen her. Just then, the doors opened and Mr. Foster, Emily's father, approached. His expression was smooth, his smile polished like the wood beneath our feet. He rested a firm hand on my shoulder. "Everything's ready," he said, his tone cheerful, but edged with something colder beneath. "The pastor's waiting, it's time." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and nodded. But as I turned toward the altar, my eyes drifted once more to that empty seat, the single flaw in an otherwise perfect picture. And for a reason I couldn't name, the sight of it sent a small, sharp chill through me, colder than the snow outside.
The next few minutes moved like a storm dressed in lace. Guests shuffled into their seats, voices hushed to polite excitement, the faint rustle of silk and whispers filling the lodge. Someone dimmed the lights, and the golden glow of candles spread across the wooden beams. Everything looked perfect. Again, too perfect. Emily stood near the back room, her veil resting like frost on her shoulders. She smiled when our eyes met, but there was a nervous tremor beneath it, a kind of practiced calm that felt brittle. Her sisters swirled around her like attendants in a performance, adjusting, straightening, whispering. "Ready, Patrick?" one of them asked. Almost. I searched the room once more, the aisle, the seats, the hallway near the kitchen. Still no sign of my mother. I found Mr. Foster near the entrance, speaking to the coordinator. His tuxedo fit like armor, his posture a declaration of control. "Excuse me," I said, approaching him. "Have you seen my mom, Margaret Carter?" He looked at me, almost amused. "Your mother? I believe she's assisting with the dinner. Quite helpful of her." "She's been gone for a while," I said quietly. "Over an hour." He patted my shoulder, the way a man might calm a nervous employee. "Patrick, let's not worry your bride. These little things happen during big days. You wouldn't want her anxious before walking down the aisle, would you?" His tone was smooth, perfectly reasonable, and yet something about it chilled me. I thought she'd be here by now," I murmured. He smiled, as if that ended the conversation. "Everything's ready. Let's make it a beautiful ceremony." Then he turned and began giving orders to the staff. The sound of the piano shifted, a soft cue that the ceremony was about to begin. Guests hushed, the photographer adjusted his lens. My best man signaled for me to take my place near the altar. But I couldn't move.
I stood frozen at the edge of the aisle, eyes still on that empty chair. Emily's mother appeared, beaming like a hostess on stage. "Patrick, sweetheart, the pastor's waiting, shall we?" "Has anyone checked the parking lot?" I asked. She blinked, surprised. "I'm sure everything is fine." It was the way she said, "I'm sure," that made me realize she wasn't sure of anything. Or perhaps she was too sure of something she didn't want me to know. Before I could respond, the pianist began the opening chords of Canon in D. The music floated through the room like glass about to break. The pastor stepped forward, the guests rose, the aisle glowed under the chandelier light. And still, that empty seat. I turned slightly, trying to see if anyone might be at the back door. That's when Earl, the lodge's driver, appeared near the entrance. He looked uneasy, his cap in his hands, snow melting on his shoulders. He caught my eye and started toward me. "Sir? About your mother." Before he could finish, Mr. Foster cut in sharply. "Earl, please, not now. The ceremony is starting." The driver hesitated, eyes darting between us. Then he stepped back, lowering his voice. "Yes, sir." I watched him retreat, a knot forming in my chest. The music swelled. Emily appeared at the end of the aisle, her veil glowing under the chandelier lights. The guests sighed, that collective murmur of admiration that feels rehearsed, too. Her father nudged me lightly between the shoulders. "Go ahead, son." My shoes pressed against the floorboards. One step, then another. But halfway to the altar, I stopped. The music didn't change. It kept playing, smooth and flawless, but the sound seemed to drain out of the world. All I could hear was my own breath. And somewhere behind it, a thought I couldn't silence. Where is my mom?
I took one step toward the altar, just one, and the world seemed to blur. The sound of the piano softened into something distant, like music played underwater. Emily's veil shimmered at the end of the aisle, her smile polite and expectant. The guests' faces were turned toward me, bright and full of warmth. But it all felt wrong. Something inside me refused to move. I blinked, trying to clear my head. My pulse thudded in my ears, keeping rhythm with the second hand of my father's watch. Tick, tick, tick. The chair. That empty chair. I couldn't stop seeing it. And then, like a small crack in the ice, a thought slipped through. My mother. She'd never miss this. Not for anything. My hand went cold against my chest. The sound of my own breath grew louder, the kind of breath you take when you're about to understand something you don't want to. A memory came without warning. The two of us in our old kitchen, years ago. I must have been 10. Snow had fallen thick that morning, and we were standing by the stove stirring cocoa. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. She was laughing, the kind of laugh that made the house feel safe. "You're my little man," she said, tapping my nose with a spoon. "If I ever miss something important in your life, it'll be because heaven itself held me back." Her voice had been teasing then, but now, in this room filled with strangers, the words came back like a whisper meant for this moment. "She'd never miss this," I murmured. Emily's smile faltered. She took a hesitant step, the silk of her gown brushing the floor. "Patrick?" Her father leaned forward from the front row. "Go on, son," he urged, his voice low and commanding. I looked at Emily again, then past her, at the faces smiling through polite confusion. They didn't know her, the woman who'd raised me, who'd worked 2 jobs to buy this suit, who'd prayed for this very day. My mother wasn't just missing, she'd been removed. Something broke open in my chest. I unbuttoned my jacket slowly, as if giving my body time to catch up with what my heart already knew. My best man whispered,
"You okay, Pat?" But I didn't answer. I just took a deep breath, one of those breaths that feels like choosing between two lives. And then I turned. The whisper spread through the guests, a rustle of surprise and discomfort. Where's he going? Is he nervous? I didn't care. My shoes echoed against the wooden floor as I walked down the aisle in the opposite direction. The music faltered. The pianist hesitated, then stopped completely. Only the fire kept its rhythm, a steady crackle in the silence. "Patrick!" Emily called after me. "Patrick, wait!" I stopped at the doorway but didn't look back. "Where is she?" "What?" "My mother." Emily blinked fast, panic flashing across her face. I don't know, maybe she—" "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't pretend." And for a second no one moved. The snow outside hit the windows in waves now, thick and restless, rattling against the glass. I pushed open the door and a gust of cold rushed in, scattering petals from the aisle across the floor. Behind me, the chatter rose, confusion, whispers, a few gasps. Someone shouted for the coordinator. But I was already outside, the wind cutting through my suit, the taste of ice on my tongue. Then, faintly, under the howl of the storm, I heard it. A sound. Rough, uneven, a car engine trying to start, then choking. Once, twice, and then silence. My heart stopped. I broke into a run, snow crunching beneath my shoes, the cold biting through every layer. Somewhere ahead, through the blur of white, a pair of headlights flickered, weak, trembling. And I knew before I even reached the road that the day I thought was perfect was about to show me exactly what it had been hiding all along.
The cold hit me like a wall. The snow had thickened into a curtain of white, blurring everything beyond a few yards. My shoes sank into it, the sound muffled, my breath burning in my chest. Each exhale came out in clouds that vanished before me, like smoke in a dream I no longer wanted to be in. "Mom!" I shouted, but the wind swallowed my voice. Then, through the swirl of snow and the dim halo of light from the lodge, I saw them. Two trembling headlights, half buried near the curve of the road. My heart began to pound, the way it does when fear and hope collide. I ran. The closer I got, the clearer the picture became. The car angled awkwardly in the drift, the tires spinning helplessly, exhaust coughing weakly into the air. My mother was outside, hands on the trunk, trying to push it free. Her coat was too thin for weather like this, one she'd owned for years, the same one she wore to Sunday service and to every one of my milestones. The fabric was soaked, her gray hair plastered with snow, her gloves missing. And still, she pushed. "Mom!" She turned, startled, her face pale, cheeks raw from the cold. For a second she just stared, as if unsure whether I was really there. Then she smiled, that same tired, apologetic smile she always wore when she thought she'd caused trouble. "Patrick, I didn't want to ruin your day." I stopped, breathless, the sight of her cracking something deep inside me. Ruin my day? I could barely speak. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" She stood, still chattering her teeth, even now through the piece of jacket. "They said they needed more potatoes for the dinner," she said, clutching a torn paper bag against her chest. The bottom was wet, the bag nearly giving out. "I thought I could make it back before the ceremony." Her hands shook. The words came out with little gasps of steam. She looked at me like she was the one who needed forgiveness. They said it wouldn't take long." I stepped forward, brushing snow from her shoulders, my own tears freezing before they could fall. "You could never ruin my day," I whispered, voice breaking. "You're the reason I have one." She laughed softly through her chattering teeth, a weak sound, full of warmth even now. I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around her, tucking it close beneath her chin. "Come on," I said. "We're going home." But she shook her head faintly. "Patrick,
You can't just walk out. They'll think... I don't care what they think. I helped her into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut, then walked around and slid behind the wheel. The car sputtered, but finally caught, engine whining in protest. The road back to the lodge was only a few hundred yards, but each turn felt heavier, like each foot of snow between us and that glowing building held a different kind of truth. As we approached, the light from the windows spilled across the snow, golden and beautiful, like it belonged to a world we'd both outgrown. Near the front steps, the driver, Earl, appeared through the storm. His eyes widened when he saw who was inside. He took off his cap, relief flooding his face. "Mrs. Carter! Thank God!" He looked at me then, his voice dropping. "I tried to tell them, sir. I told them she was gone too long. They said to stay out of it." I nodded, gripping the wheel. "Not your fault." He stepped aside as I helped her out of the car. She leaned on me, the snow crunching under our feet. Inside, the music was still playing, strings and piano, slow and delicate. I pushed the heavy door open. The warmth hit us first, then the light. Conversation, laughter, the smell of wine and candles. But as the door creaked wider and the guests turned, the music stopped mid-note. Every head swiveled toward us. My mother, drenched in snow, shivering in my jacket. Me, standing beside her, with the paper bag of potatoes clutched in my hand. No one spoke. Not the bride, not her father, not the pastor waiting by the altar. The silence felt endless, heavy enough to crush the air between us. And for the first time all night, I was grateful for it.
Every head in that golden room turned toward us. The sound of the door closing behind me echoed like a crack through glass. For a moment, no one breathed. My mother stood beside me, trembling under my jacket, snow melting in her hair. The bag of potatoes slipped from her hands, landing softly on the wooden floor, a dull, hollow thud. The pianist froze with his hands above the keys. The scent of roses and champagne hung in the air, suddenly sour. I felt every pair of eyes on us, curiosity first, then confusion, and finally embarrassment, as if they were watching something that shouldn't have existed in their perfect picture. "Patrick?" Emily's voice broke the silence. She stood at the altar, her white dress glowing under the chandelier, eyes wide, face pale. "What happened?" I looked at her, but before I could speak, her father stepped forward. Mr. Foster, always calm, always in control, adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. "Let's not make a scene," he said gently, like a man managing a small inconvenience. "She's fine, clearly. Let's help Mrs. Carter warm up, and then we can continue." I stared at him, the warmth from the room already gone from my body. "A scene?" I repeated quietly. He smiled, the kind of smile that hides behind power. "Yes, son. You've had a long day. Emotions run high. Let's not let a misunderstanding spoil what should be a beautiful moment." I stepped closer until we stood almost face to face. "The scene," I said, my voice steady, "was made when you sent my mother out in the snow." Gasps rippled through the room. Emily flinched, her hands tightening around her bouquet. Her mother looked away. Mr. Foster's composure cracked, just slightly. "That's absurd," he said. "No one sent her anywhere. She didn't just decide to leave in the middle of her son's wedding. Someone asked her to. Someone thought she didn't belong here long enough to stay." Margaret's voice trembled behind me. "Patrick, please let it go. It's—" I turned to her, gently. "Mom, you've spent your life letting things go. Not this time." The murmur in the crowd grew louder.
Whispers, shifting seats, the low hum of discomfort spreading like fire under the tablecloths. Mr. Foster straightened again, grasping for his authority. "Patrick, let's keep this dignified." "Dignity," I said, taking the ring from my pocket, "isn't built on lies." I walked toward the front, each step ringing in the silence. Emily's eyes glistened, and for a heartbeat I saw something like regret flicker across her face, a flash of realization that she'd lost something she hadn't valued enough to protect. I reached the small table beside the altar, the one where the candlelight danced over polished silver. Slowly, I placed the wedding ring on it. The metal clicked softly against the wood, a sound louder than any shout could have been. "I won't start a marriage built on shame and lies," I said, not looking at anyone in particular. My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. I turned back to my mother. Her eyes were full of confusion, of worry, but also pride, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken. I reached for her hand. "Let's go home, Mom." She hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. We walked together down the aisle that only hours ago was supposed to mark the beginning of my new life. Now it felt like a path back to the one I'd almost forgotten. The guests parted as we passed, their silence louder than any applause could have been. When we reached the door, I paused and looked back once, at the altar, at Emily, at everything that glittered but had no warmth. Then I opened the door. A rush of cold wind swept in, scattering the petals across the floor, dimming the candles. We stepped outside. The door closed behind us with a heavy sound, and as it did, the music inside began again, faint, hollow, meaningless. The snow swallowed it whole, and soon there was nothing left but white.
It was 3 days before I could bring myself to go back. The storm had passed. The mountains looked softer now, their peaks brushed with pale sunlight. The roads were clearer, the air gentler, but everything still carried that heavy, echoing quiet that follows something broken. I parked near the empty lodge, the same one that had once glowed like a beacon through the snow. Now it sat dark, shutters closed, the last of the wedding lights tangled around the porch railing. I stepped out of the truck, my boots crunching against the half-melted ice. Inside, the air was cold but still. The scent of roses lingered, faint but haunting, mixed with the sweetness of melted wax. The floor was scattered with dried petals, flattened footprints, the remnants of a celebration that no longer meant anything. The altar was gone. The chairs were stacked along the wall, all except one. One chair still sat where it had been that day, second from the aisle, the white ribbon drooping from its side. On the seat lay a single dried flower, brittle and faded, left behind by accident or mercy. I walked toward it slowly, the sound of my footsteps hollow in the empty room. I stopped in front of that chair and ran my hand across the ribbon. It had frayed a little, the knot loose, but it was still there. The only honest thing left in this place. I didn't sit. I just stood there, the silence thick around me, and reached into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed against a folded envelope, cream-colored, the paper soft from being carried too long. My mother's handwriting curved across it in blue ink. "For Patrick, on your wedding day." She'd told me about it after everything, how she'd written a letter that morning, planning to slip it into my pocket when she arrived. She never got the chance. She'd given it to me later, while I was driving her home through the snow. She said she didn't mind that I'd already known what it said, but I hadn't read it, not until now. I opened the envelope carefully. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded it. "My dear Patrick, if someday you feel alone,
Remember that love never leaves you. It only waits until you see it again. You've grown into the kind of man your father would have been proud of. You've already given me everything a mother could ask for: kindness, patience, and a heart that forgives too easily. Don't let the world convince you that those things are weaknesses. They are your inheritance. Today, when you stand at that altar, I want you to remember this: love is not about the perfect room or the perfect family. It's about who still stands beside you when the music stops. I closed the letter and exhaled slowly. The air came out shaky, but it felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of that day had finally found its ending. I looked once more at the chair, at the flower resting there like a memory that refused to wilt completely. Then I smiled, not the way people smile when they're happy, but the way they do when they finally understand something they've been trying not to see. Outside, the snow had begun to melt, streams of water running quietly along the edge of the path. I stepped out into the light, the cold air wrapping around me one last time. The mountains were bright again, the sky pale blue. And as I walked away from the lodge, I heard her voice in my mind, warm, patient, steady, carrying that final truth she'd always known before I did. That day, I didn't marry the woman I loved, but I found the love that never left me. The wind softened, the snow surrendered. Fade out.